So a lot of people have asked me how to install ArchLinux, and while the ArchLinux wiki has a very good article called Installation Guide, and it is actually a rather fantastic wiki overall, this can be kind of confusing for some people, and especially if you're using on Virtualbox, there are some extra things that you'll need to do. So this video is going to use this guide as a reference, and it's going to show you step by step how to install ArchLinux on your Virtualbox machine. Now, if you don't know what Virtualbox is, it's made by Oracle and basically allows you to create a virtual computer, a virtual machine on your home computer. So right now, I have a Windows home computer, and if you install Virtualbox, you can just install it by going to the website. It's pretty simple. Once you have Virtualbox all installed, you can just launch it, and it'll show this screen right here. Now, if you're familiar with Virtualbox, it's pretty obvious where everything is. On this end are the different machines. So right now I already have my own Arch machine, and here's the information on it. So we want to make our own one. You shouldn't have any machines if you're just starting up Virtualbox for the first time. So we'll hit New, and we'll call it just some descriptive name. Now next is memory size. You can make this anything you want. I believe I have 8 gigs of memory, so I'll give it 1024 just for the test. Hard disk space, you want to create a virtual hard disk. This VDI is fine. I recommend putting it on fixed sized. It's going to take a bit longer than if you put dynamically, but the performance is going to be better. But up to you. And location, that's fine. And size, I'll give it 8 gigabytes. Or let me change the location real quick. Okay. 8 gigabytes, that's the recommended size for ArchLinux. Create. Now this can be as big as you want, and you can't make it too small though, otherwise all the necessary system files won't be able to fit. So we'll create, and then we wait for this to load. It won't take that long for 8 gigabytes. If you had 20, it might take a bit longer. So while that's being set up, let's download the disk image for ArchLinux. A disk image is basically, in layman's term, a virtual hard disk placed in one file. And Virtualbox takes that disk image and it launches basically a computer with it. And you use that computer to install ArchLinux into your actual computer. So it's kind of complicated, but just know that all you have to do is install an ISO file. So go to archlinux.org/download. Go to your mirror of choice. My mirror is going to be under United States, and it doesn't matter which one you pick. You just want to make sure that you download the one that ends in .iso, like this one. And you wait for it to install. It's half a gig, so it's going to take a little bit. And then once that's done, you can continue with the Virtualbox ArchLinux installation. So now that it's finished processing, you should have a machine on this side called whatever you called it. So I called it Arch Tutorial, and it should say powered off. So to start it, you can just double click or you can press start, and it will launch a new window with your Arch machine. Now, and then it's going to ask for your startup disk. So this is the disk image you downloaded earlier. So this one, it auto-detects the one I used before. So otherwise, you'd have to go and find your own. Not that hard. Hit start, and then it launches that disk image and boots into it. Now, with Virtualbox, the default button for doing things in Virtualbox is right control. So if you want to make it full screen, you can hit right control and F, and that just makes it all full screen. And it's kind of cool. It's like having one monitor. I have a 2-monitor setup. It's like having one monitor Linux, another monitor Windows. So, or if you prefer, you can just minimize it. Control F again to exit it. You can scale it, whatever you want. So now it's going to ask. Now it's going to launch this screen, courtesy of your disk image. And with boot ArchLinux, that's going to boot into the image file you downloaded. So you want to go boot ArchLinux. You can press Enter and use the up and down arrow keys to move. And once you're here, we're waiting for it to start up. Okay, it's going to automatically log into root, and now you're in the disk image. So now that we're here, we're going to use a variety of terminal commands to install ArchLinux, and all the terminal commands will be in the description. Alright, first, before we do anything, we should make sure you're connected to the internet. So this should definitely be the case, but it's worth checking. So you hit the ping command, ping archlinux.org. This pings the server archlinux.org, and as we see, we are getting bytes. So we are connected to the internet. So that's nice to know. So now, the first thing to do is we need to partition our disks. So I allocated 8 gigabytes for this test machine. So we're gonna partition. I'm gonna probably do 4 gigabytes for the system files and 4 gigabytes for personal files. Personal files being pictures, anything anything you download to your computer, and system files being anything the system needs to run. So display managers, compilers, that kind of stuff. So if you type fdisk fdisk is the command we're going to use often. It's going to let you view your different drives and partition them. L is going to list what drives you have and what kind of partition. So notice we have 2 drives. We have loop 0, which you can just ignore, and we have SDA. SDA, if you're not familiar with Linux drives, that's basically like the equivalent of the C drive in Windows. So it says SDA is 8 gigabytes, which is what I allocated. So if you want to edit it, you have fdisk dev SDA. I'm just copying the name of the disk. Yours should be the exact same. Fdisk dev SDA. Now, it's going to give you this command. So we're going to set up a new partition table. So hit N for new. And partition type, you can make this primary. Partition number, default 1. First sector, okay. So the beginning of the partition will be 2048, so I can hit default. The last sector, I said I wanted to make this is going to be the system partition. I said I wanted to make it 4 gigabytes. So you hit plus 4G. It's going to add 4 gigabytes from the start. And there you go. It says create a new partition of type 1 and size 4 gigabytes. Cool. Now we're going to make another partition. We're going to make it 2. Now the first sector is going to be where the first sector of this partition is going to be where the last partition stopped. So just the default. And we're going to have it go all the way. So just default again. 4 gigabytes. Cool. So now you can't exit yet because it hasn't actually made the partition. So you have to hit W to write the partition to the disk. So once you have this screen, you're good. And check that you're actually okay. If you hit fdisk L again, there you go. It lists dev SDA, and it has dev SDA 1 and dev SDA 2. So now that we have them, the next step is to format these partitions. So you have to format the partitions to have the right file systems you want. So you don't have to worry about what that means, like in a technical level. All you got to do is enter this command, basically make file system ext4 dev sda1. So this is basically one of the file systems that ArchLinux can use. So you got to make sda1 that, and it's going to take a little bit to load, and then you do the same thing with sda2. So if there's no error messages, you're good to go. If there is an error message, and it's happened to me before, I recommend going back to fdisk L, or fdisk dev sda1, or sda, my bad, and hit delete to delete your partition and start over. But I'm not going to do that because mine's good. Okay. Now that you have this, the next step is to mount these partitions to various drives. So right now, if you hit ls, you can notice that there's a bunch of folders set up. This is all in the disk image. You see where the folder mount right there? That's where you're going to mount your partitions, and that's where you're going to install your actual machine. So you can type mount dev sda1. You're going to mount the sda1 partition into mount. And then you're going to go into your mount folder, and then you're going to make a folder called, I'm going to call it home for your personal files, and then you can mount your SDA2 into your mount home. And there you go. You should have the 2 things mounted. Now all that's left is to actually install Arch. Alright, so before we can actually install anything, you got to figure out which mirror you're going to use to install from. So by default, I believe the mirror is someplace in the US. So if you live in the US, that's going to be pretty fast. But if you're not, you're going to have to change it. So editing config files is something you're going to do quite often using ArchLinux, so might as well learn how to do it now. So text editor of choice. I think right now the only one you can use is nano. So type nano, and then you want to pick this file, which is at etc pacman.d mirrorlist. Okay, now here's a file right here. And for this file, there's going to be a list of servers, and above each server is commented where it's from. So find the server you want. So let's say I want this United States, for example. Someone else might want this Germany server. Say I want this, you go to the line you want, so this would be this line, hit Control K to cut, scroll to the top, before everything else, and then hit Control U to paste. So there you go. With that set up, what pacman, which is the package manager for Arch, is going to do is going to look for this file and it's going to use the first mirror listed. If that mirror doesn't work, it's going to go for the second mirror, third mirror, etc. So with that out of the way, to save this file, you hit Control X, Y for yes to save, and then Enter to say that you want to save it as the same file. So there you go. Alright, now that we have this, we can actually install the base packages. So we use pacstrap. Now mnt mount, that's our we said that was our system, that's where our system files are going to be mounted, and then base. And it's going to, now that we've selected the right place, it's going to install it. If this takes forever, it might be your network connection, it might be because you put the wrong mirror up, who knows. But let's let this download. Okay, so now that this is finished installing, now we can do some of the later stages of the installation. So first, you got to generate a file system table file. Basically, what it's going to do is it's going to tell Arch, okay, look, this is how my files are set up. I have this in SDA1, I have this in SDA2, etc. So there's a complicated way of doing that. You can simply just do it by typing this command, genfstab -u /mnt angle brackets mount etc fstab. There you go. It created a file and shoved it in mount etc fstab. So now that you have that, basically you're all ready for getting into your computer. So we can type the command arch-chroot mnt. What that's going to do is it's going to log into your computer essentially, because once again we said a computer is going to be in the /mnt directory. So this is going to quote unquote log you into it. So now notice that it changed slightly. So now we're in MNT. So you can set the time zone with this command. Real quick, before we do this, first you got to check the name of the time zones. So go to the folder with this command, cd user share zoneinfo. Now, you go here, if you have ls, you can list all the zones that it finds. So find the zone that applies to you. So for me, it would be America, cd America. And now here would be a list of even more possible time zones. And so I look up here, New York, that's the one I want. So the command I'll type is ln sf user share zoneinfo America New York. And then I'll put it at etc local time. There you go. If that's set up, then the next thing is to set up the clock based on this time zone. So the command is this, systohc. Okay, no errors came up, so we're good. Now, to check that this actually worked, you can type in the command hwclock, and there you go. That's the correct time in my time zone. So now they got that out of the way, the next step is to set up the locale. So this is to localize your computer. If you want to edit this configuration file, it's going to be etc/locale.gen. And you're going to go and you're going to find the one that corresponds to you. And I don't know what's specifically going to correspond to your thing, but for me, it's going to be en_US for English United States. So you're going to find that. Here it is. Uncomment the file. That's not the one I want, actually. You want the one that's UTF-8, I believe, regardless of which one you end up choosing. So now that you uncommented it, you want Control X, Y, Enter. It's enter way to exit nano. Okay? And then you could type locale.gen. And it's going to generate the locale based on what you have. So cool. Now that you got that out of the way, you should be good to go. So before you get into your computer, it might be worthwhile to set up internet now. You can do this later, but I think I'd recommend setting up your internet now. So notice the internet worked fine before when you checked, but that was the internet for the disk image. We want to make sure that the connection is all set up for our virtual machine itself. So type the command ip-link. That's going to show your different devices for internet. And you see, ignore the LO. The second one is ENP0S3. It might be different on yours, but for me it's always been this one. So you want to type the command systemctl enable dhcpcd at enp0s3.service. So this is just going to enable that Ethernet service. And it's not really the Ethernet service, it's Virtualbox's service for internet, but this is just going to end up enabling it. So now that next time we reboot, it's going to automatically turn it on by default. Now we need to configure pacman, which is the package manager for ArchLinux. So you can configure it by editing the configuration file with nano. So that's the command. And you scroll down until you find here. We should have core, extra, and community already uncommented. But if you have a 64-bit system, you'll need to uncomment multi-lib, and make sure you uncomment both of these lines, not just one of them. So uncomment the multi-lib, multi-library line, and the include that line too. So then we got that out of the way. We're done with configuration. Control X, Y, Enter, and that should automatically work. But you need to refresh your repository list because you just said to add more. So SY, okay, it loaded it all up. So now we're almost ready to just reboot at this point. But first we need to create a password for our user accounts. So the first command is password. So right now we're on the user account root, and root is basically like the administrator. He can do basically anything. But it's really dangerous to just be on root. You want to make a user account, that way you can be on the user account and do things without a risk of harming your computer all the time. If you're on root, you could accidentally end up deleting everything, and it won't even ask for confirmation. If you're on the user account, it will at least ask, like, are you sure you want to do this? So, creating a password real quick. It doesn't matter what you put, as long as you remember it, because you're going to use it to log in if anything goes wrong. So, now that we create a password for root, we got to make a user account for the reasons I said earlier. So the command is user add mg users.g. Now these are the permissions we want to give them: wheel, storage, and power. Ish bin bash. Okay, that's all the stuff you need to write. Now the next comment has to be the user you want it to be. So my user, I'm just gonna call it arc. That's gonna probably get confusing. I'm gonna call it my user. User, my bad. User add is one command. Okay, so that added a user called my user, and then you can set the password for that account by using passwd my user, and you can do whatever password you want. And there you go. It created a new user. So now they got that all the way. If you want to log into your other user, you should install a command called sudo. If you ever used Linux before, sudo basically allows your user accounts to do things that a root account would do. So if you want to install anything, that's going to require root privileges, so you'd have to do sudo to install it. So it'd be useful to install something. Now here's how you install anything with pacman. It's pretty simple. You type pacman s, capital S, and then you type the package you want to install. So right now we're in sudo. And then yes to confirm, and there you go, sudo's all set up. If you want to search pacman, the command is pacman ss, and it's going to list all the packages that have sudo in them. But that's just how to use pacman. You can figure that out later. So now we have to edit this. We have to edit sudo to add our new user to the list of things it can allow. So the command is editor equals and nano, because that's the editor we've been using, via sudo. There we go. You want to scroll until you find the line that says wheel all equals all. So now that if you uncomment this, that basically allows our user, which we said had, if you remember the command, it had a wheel somewhere, it allowed that user to execute any command. That's a user group wheel. So you save it, and now that's done, you're basically ready to boot into it. So if you restart, you're going to have some issues because you didn't give it what is known as a bootloader. There's no way to actually boot into your machine. The most popular bootloader that most people use is what is known as grub. So let's install grub. So once again, the command to install anything with pacman is pacman-S, and the thing you want to install is called grub bios. Yes, proceed with installation. And it's going to load for a bit. Okay, once it's done, the next command is grub install target equals i386, yeah, it's i386 dash pc dash recheck dev SDA. Remember, dev SDA is the disk you chose earlier, the disk you partitioned. Okay, it's gonna install. It's gonna set it up for dev SDA, so that way when you restart, it's going to load you into SDA. There we go. No error reported. And then last is you're gonna have to copy a file to somewhere else. So the full command is this. Remember to check the description for these commands. Alright, you're gonna copy this file to this location. No issues, that means it went perfectly. Cool. And now when you have that done, the last thing is to basically the configuration you copied, you gotta make it. So the command is here, grub make config -o boot grub.cfg. There's no errors, that means you're good. No errors, cool. Okay, so that means we're done. Now, before we can reboot, we have to unmount our partitions. So first exit. Remember, we were quote unquote logged in to our computer there. So we gotta log out with exit, and they're gonna unmount our different mounts. So first we unmounted something on home. Gotta unmount that, and we gotta unmount the whole mount thing itself. Target is busy. Oh, you have to exit out of the folder first. There you go. Yeah, make sure earlier it's the target is busy because I was in the MNT folder. Make sure you're outside of the MNT folder when you unmount it. And then last command, reboot. It's gonna reboot out of your disk image. Okay, so you're here now. This is the same window you saw earlier, and if you click boot ArchLinux, it's actually gonna log you into the disk image. So you don't want to do that. You want to boot into what is the existing OS, because now you've installed Arch. Now you've installed Arch. So now this is grub. It lets you, if you have multiple options, you could pick between Arch, you could pick Windows, etc. So we're just gonna go Arch, and after that's set up, it's gonna take a little bit to configure everything because you're starting it up for the first time. There you go. When you're in this screen, that means you've logged in. Now it's gonna ask for a login. Now you can use the user you made earlier, password for the user you made earlier. There you go. Now you're inside. Now you're actually logged into your Arch machine. So technically we're done. We've finished installing Arch and we've logged in. Now you might be thinking this is a joke, right? This is obviously just a terminal. I didn't sign up for this. But the different desktop environments and whatever GUI you end up using, that's all personal preference. So I'm going to make another video after this about what desktop environments to use and what to set up and how to do that. But as for installing Arch, this is all it takes. So thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you in the next video. If you have any questions, leave a comment and make sure to check the description for more details.